A farmer's wife stepped forward with an envelope. And the moment President Trump opened it, everything changed. People packed around the wooden stage where President Trump was scheduled to speak. Laughter, conversation, and the clatter of booths selling pies and homemade crafts blended into one noisy, cheerful hum. Families held up phones, hoping to capture a picture. Volunteers waved signs. Reporters adjusted their cameras. But in the middle of all that busy movement, one woman stepped forward with a calmness that seemed to part the noise around her. Her name was Martha Collins, a 70-year-old farmer's wife whose quiet strength had earned her deep respect in her community. To her neighbors, Martha wasn't just a farmer's wife, she was a symbol of perseverance. She had lived through floods, droughts, storms, and years when the crops barely paid the bills. Yet she always remained steady, always hopeful. That day, she approached the stage holding a small, worn envelope against her chest, as if it contained something fragile, something personal. Her aged boots pressed into the dusty ground with every careful step. Her silver hair, pulled back in a neat bun, glimmered under the sunlight. Security noticed her immediately. She looked harmless, gentle, and purposeful. After a brief check, they gave her a nod and allowed her through the barrier. The crowd quieted as she climbed the steps. Even President Trump seemed curious as he watched her approach. When she finally stood before him, Martha lifted her eyes that carried decades of stories and said softly but firmly, "Sir, I think you need to see this." President Trump reached out, and Martha placed the envelope in his hand. His expression shifted from curiosity to surprise as he pulled out what was inside. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a complaint. It wasn't even a request. It was a single faded photograph, edges worn, colors softened with age. No one around them knew what it showed. But the moment President Trump looked at it, his posture changed. His eyebrows lowered, his eyes narrowed with recognition, and for a brief second, he didn't say a word. Within hours, this quiet exchange would ignite the entire internet. But right there, in that exact moment, everything simply stopped. When President Trump took the photo into his hands, he didn't react immediately. For a moment, his usual confident expression the crowd knew well shifted into something far more vulnerable. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in recognition, or the ghost of it. The noise of the fair seemed to fade as he studied the aged photograph. Martha watched him gently, her hands folded in front of her. She knew the moment would hit him, and she gave him time. After several seconds of silence, she spoke in a soft voice filled with memory. "This picture was taken 40 years ago," she said. "Right here, on this very farm. Back then, it wasn't much. Just a few acres, a small barn, and my husband Henry, trying to keep everything together." The picture told its own story. In the faded frame, a younger Martha stood beside Henry, both smiling with the pride of people who worked hard for everything they had. The tractor behind them was old, dented, and coated in dust like it had lived through more storms than it should have survived. And yet, the couple's smiles made it seem like treasure. But the most surprising part of the image was not the tractor, or the barn, or even Henry and Martha. In the background, half hidden by the wooden fence, stood a tall man in work clothes. He was holding up a fence post while Henry hammered nails into it. "That man back there," Martha said, lifting her wrinkled finger to tap the image, "is you." President Trump blinked, leaning in a little closer. "I helped fix a fence," he said with a small, incredulous laugh. Martha nodded, smiling faintly. "You were visiting Iowa back then. Nobody knew your name. You weren't a businessman yet, not really anyone at all. Just a young man, curious about farmland. Henry asked if you could lend a hand, and you did. You didn't think twice." The crowd, previously loud and buzzing, had gone completely silent. Even the reporters, who rarely missed a moment, seemed frozen. Their cameras lowered at their sides, but Martha continued, her voice trembling at the edges. "My husband always said that stranger was kinder than he needed to be. Henry passed away last year, but he kept this picture in his wallet every single day." President Trump looked back at the photo, and something shifted in his expression. Something the cameras captured perfectly. What happened next would soon become the clip replayed. millions of times across the internet. Trump swallowed hard, the weight of the moment settling over him like a heavy coat. In a voice lower and quieter than anyone expected, he said, "Your husband sounds like a good man. I am honored he kept this." Martha's lips trembled as she tried to smile. He was a good man. A simple man. He never cared much for attention, but he cared about people. Before he died, Henry made me promise I'd give you this photo if I ever had the chance. He said you should know that one small act of kindness made our hardest year a little easier. The words floated into the warm Iowa air, and suddenly the entire fairground seemed to fall into an almost reverent silence. Even the rustling of the cornfields beyond the fence felt muted. People shifted closer, as if they, too, felt the importance of the exchange. President Trump looked down at the photo again. This time, instead of surprise, something deeper washed over his face reflection, maybe even a touch of humility. His thumb brushed gently over the faded surface, tracing the outline of the fence he once helped repair. Then he looked up and said something nobody expected. "People remember the moments we forget," he said softly. "Maybe those moments matter most." For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Then phones shot into the air, cameras clicked. Reporters who had been bracing for political soundbites suddenly realized they had captured something far more human. Within hours, that single line exploded across social media. Clips of Martha handing him the photo ricocheted across TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter. People stitched reactions, made edits, added emotional music, and shared stories from their own live stories about strangers who helped them on difficult days, about kindness shown when no one was watching. The moment struck a nerve. On Instagram, a teenager posted a video of her grandmother who remembered meeting a generous stranger decades ago. On TikTok, farmers filmed themselves standing beside the fences on their own land, reflecting on the thousands of quiet, unnoticed acts that hold rural life together. Soon, the hashtag moments we forget climbed to the top of trending lists worldwide. Comment sections overflowed with people saying the same thing. For once, this wasn't about politics. It was about being human. But as powerful as the online reaction was, the story was far from over. Because the very next morning, an unexpected knock on Martha Collins's farmhouse door would change everything again. The next morning, something unusual happened, something nobody in the quiet Iowa community could have predicted. President Trump asked to visit Martha's farm. The request sent a ripple of excitement across the area. News crews scrambled to reach the small gravel road leading to the Collins property. Neighbors, some still in work boots, others carrying morning coffee, gathered along the fence line, whispering and pointing as the presidential motorcade turned down the long dirt driveway. Martha stood on her front porch, gripping the railing as the black SUVs rumbled closer. She couldn't quite believe any of this was real. Just yesterday she had handed over a photograph she had guarded for decades, and now the leader of the country was coming to her home because of it. When the vehicle stopped, President Trump stepped out, not to the blare of microphones, not surrounded by bright lights or booming music. He stepped out quietly, holding the same faded photograph in his hand. The wind tugged gently at his tie as he looked around the property with a nostalgic expression. "This place hasn't changed much," he said with a small smile. Martha chuckled, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "Oh, it's changed plenty, but the memories haven't." She guided him past the chickens wandering freely around the yard, past the aging barn with peeling red paint, and finally toward the old wooden fence, the very one from the photograph. Time had not been kind to it. Several boards were missing, and an entire section leaned dangerously to the side. Trump stepped up to it, studying it closely before turning to Martha. Then, without waiting for an audience or instruction, he removed his jacket, draped it over a fence post, and rolled up his sleeves. "Well," he said, "we can't let a fence look like this, can we?" The moment the cameras captured this President Trump, grabbing a hammer from Martha's tool bucket and inspecting a loose board, the world seemed to pause. It wasn't a staged event. It wasn't a press moment. It felt oddly human. Neighbors gradually drifted in, drawn by curiosity and a sense of shared purpose. Some brought tools from their trucks. A few kids ran out carrying lemonade cups. Others simply watched wide-eyed. As the President of the United States hammered nails beside a 13-year-old farmer's wife on a quiet Iowa morning, it didn't feel political. It felt like a community coming alive, one board, one nail, one unexpected moment at a time. After the fence was repaired, the atmosphere around Martha's farm felt lighter, as if the land itself breathed a long, peaceful sigh. Martha wiped her hands on her apron and invited everyone to the backyard for pie, insisting that no one leave without tasting Henry's favorite recipe, a tradition she continued to honor. Long wooden picnic tables were pulled together beneath the shade of an old oak tree. Martha served slices of warm apple pie on mismatched plates she had collected over the years. The smell of cinnamon drifted through the air, mixing with laughter and the gentle chatter of neighbors. President Trump sat among them, not at the head of the table, not surrounded by advisors, but shoulder to shoulder with farmers who spoke openly about their lives, their crops, and the challenges they faced each season. He listened, genuinely, nodding as they described droughts, storms, rising costs, and the pride they took in their land. It felt strangely natural, as if the farm had temporarily become a place where titles didn't matter. As the sun began to dip behind the horizon, casting gold over the fields, Trump stood up to leave. The crowd parted respectfully. Martha stepped toward him, her eyes glistening, and placed her hand gently over his. "Thank you for coming back," she said, her voice soft but steady. Henry would have been proud. Trump held her gaze for a moment, his expression sincere. "Thank you," he replied quietly, "for reminding me of who I used to be, and who I can still be." Someone nearby recorded that small exchange, almost by accident. But it was that exact video, the gentle handshake, the soft voices, the simple humanity that spread like wildfire across the internet. People didn't share it for political reasons. They didn't share it because of controversy or debate. They shared it because it felt real, raw, honest, and deeply human. Millions of viewers commented that, for once, they weren't watching a speech or a headline. They were watching a story about kindness, memory, and the unexpected ways people shape each other's lives. Later, in a quiet interview, Martha summed it up perfectly. "This wasn't about fame or power or anything big," she said. "It was about honoring a promise and reminding the world that a single good deed can echo across a lifetime." Today, the old photograph hangs framed in her living room. Beside it is a new picture taken the morning the fence was rebuilt. A reminder that sometimes the past finds its way back, and when it does, the world watches in awe.